Story 1. The man in the service elevator. When I moved into the building, I told everyone the same thing. It was secure. That was the selling point. The leasing agent had emphasized it repeatedly. Keycard-restricted elevators, 24-hour concierge, biometric access to the gym, monitored underground parking, hallway cameras on every floor. It was one of those modern glass towers downtown, the kind with polished concrete floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a skyline that looked clean and artificial at night. I lived on the 37th floor, high enough that traffic noise dissolved into a distant hum, high enough that when fog rolled in, it swallowed the lower half of the city and made it feel like I was suspended above everything. I liked that feeling. For the first 3 weeks, nothing felt unusual. The elevator required a keycard tap before it would allow floor selection. Visitors had to be approved through the intercom system in the lobby. Packages were scanned. Every hallway had motion-triggered lighting and visible dome cameras mounted at the corners. It felt controlled, contained. That's why the first incident didn't immediately register as strange. It was just after midnight. I'd stayed up working, and I went downstairs to grab a food delivery. The main elevators were under maintenance, so the concierge directed residents to use the service elevator temporarily. The service elevator was narrower, stainless steel interior, no mirror, no ambient lighting, just a single recessed panel that cast a sterile white glow. When the doors opened on the ground floor, someone was already inside. A man stood facing the back wall. I noticed him because he didn't turn when I stepped in. Most people glance up, or at least shift slightly to acknowledge another presence. He didn't. He wore a dark coat, mid-length, formal, out of place for that hour. His hair was short, neatly parted, his posture straight. The elevator doors closed. I tapped my keycard. 37, I said reflexively, even though I didn't need to. The elevator didn't move. I glanced at the panel. No floors were lit. The man hadn't pressed anything. "You going up?" I asked. No response. I assumed he hadn't heard me. The elevator doors opened again. We were still on the ground floor. I frowned and stepped out, assuming it had malfunctioned. When I turned back, the elevator was empty. The man was gone. There were only 2 exits from that lobby, the front entrance and the garage access. I would have seen him leave. The service elevator had no secondary doors. I didn't mention it to anyone. It was late. I was tired. Buildings have blind spots. That's what I told myself. The second time happened 4 days later. I was coming home from work around 8:30 p.m. The lobby was busy, residents coming in, a courier arguing with the concierge about a signature. I tapped into the main elevator bank and rode up with a woman from the 12th floor. Normal conversation, with her complaints. When the elevator reached 37, I stepped out alone. The hallway lights flicked on automatically as I walked toward my unit. Halfway down the corridor, I heard another set of footsteps behind me. Slow, evenly spaced. I didn't turn immediately because it didn't seem necessary. People live here. Someone likely exited at the same time, but the rhythm felt deliberate, not hurried, not casual, measured. I slowed slightly. The footsteps slowed. I stopped. They stopped. I turned. The hallway was empty. 37 has 8 units. All doors were closed. The cameras were in their usual places, black hemispheres mounted near the ceiling. No one was there. The air felt oddly still, like when an HVAC system shuts off and you notice the absence of white noise. I stood there longer than I care to admit. Then I told myself something simple. Acoustics. Sound travels strangely in enclosed corridors. Someone on another floor, maybe above, maybe below. I unlocked my door and went inside. That night, I checked the building's resident portal. There's an internal app that logs keycard activity when your card accesses elevators, amenities, or parking. At 8:31 p.m., my card registered access to floor 37. At 8:31 p.m., another keycard accessed floor 37, no unit number attached. It's just service access. I emailed management the next morning. They responded quickly. Professional tone? Service access referred to maintenance staff. Sometimes they used MasterCards for inspections or HVAC checks. That was reasonable, except no maintenance notices had been posted for our floor. I let it go again. You don't want to be the resident who overreacts to minor things. The third incident was impossible to ignore. It started with the security cameras. Each resident can access live hallway feeds through the building's app. It's marketed as a transparency feature. One Saturday afternoon, I opened the app because I'd heard a loud thud outside my door. Like something heavy hitting the carpet. It's a camera feed loaded. The hallway was empty. But at the far end near the emergency exit stairwell stood the man from the service elevator. He was facing the camera, completely still. The video timestamp read 2:17. I stared at the screen. He wasn't moving, not shifting weight, not adjusting posture, just standing, watching. I exited the feed and reopened it. The hallway was empty. I rewound the recording. At 2:16, the corridor was clear. At 2:17, he was there, not walking into frame, not emerging from a door, just present. At 2:18, gone. No visible exit, no door opening, no stairwell movement. I checked the other floor cameras. Nothing. The stairwell cameras showed no activity. The elevator logs showed no stop at 37 between 2 o'clock and 2:30. I sent the clip to management. They responded 2 days later. There appears to be a compression artifact in the footage. Our system occasionally misrenders shadow data under certain lighting conditions. The compression artifact does not wear a coat. After that, things escalated, but subtly. I began hearing the service elevator at odd hours, even though it was no longer under maintenance. It has a distinct mechanical sound, a low grinding hum, followed by a soft metallic click when doors open. At 2:12 a.m. I heard it stop on my floor. I didn't check immediately. I waited. Footsteps. Slow even. Measured. Moving down the corridor, stopping outside my door. Silence, then continuing. I approached the peephole. The hallway was empty. I checked the app. The camera feed showed nothing. But the audio sensor, another feature in the system, had logged elevated decibel anomaly at 2:13 a.m. No source identified. Sleep became difficult. Not because I felt threatened, but because I felt observed. Building security, once reassuring, began to feel oppressive. Too many cameras, too many access logs, too much documentation that showed nothing. One evening, the concierge called my unit. "Sir," he said carefully, "have you authorized anyone to use the service elevator under your credentials?" "No. There's a pattern we're noticing. Your keycard ID appears in service elevator logs late at night." "That's not possible. It's been scanned at 2:12 a.m. 3 times this week. I was asleep at 2:12 a.m. My keycard was on my kitchen counter. I checked immediately after the call. Still there. Asked to review the footage from the service elevator interior camera. They allowed it reluctantly. The clip showed the inside of the elevator. Timestamp, 2:12 a.m. The doors opened on the ground floor. The man stepped in. He tapped the panel with his right hand. The button for 37 illuminated. The elevator ascended. At 37, the doors opened. He stepped out. The hallway camera did not capture him exiting. The elevator interior camera did not capture him entering again. He vanished between systems. "Who is that?" I asked the building manager. She shook her head. "We don't have a resident matching that description. Maintenance. No one works nights without logged scheduling." The worst part wasn't his presence. It was his behavior. He moved with purpose, as if he lived there, as if he belonged. The final incident happened on a Thursday. Rainstorm outside, wind against the windows 37 floors up, sounding like distant surf. Around 1:45 a.m., my smart thermostat display flickered. Just once. Then again, checked the hallway camera out of habit. He was standing directly in front of my door, closer than before. So close that the camera's lens slightly distorted his proportions. His face was clearer now, pale, expressionless, eyes open but unfocused. Like he wasn't looking at the door, he was looking through it. I didn't feel panic. I felt something colder. Recognition. He lifted his right hand, not to knock, not to reach for the handle. Just lifted it, hovering inches from the door's surface. The camera feed glitched. When it restored, the hallway was empty. My doorbell rang. Not the building intercom, my unit doorbell. Press. Clean, mechanical. I stood in the living room. I did not approach the door. The handle turned. Slowly it stopped halfway, as if resistance met it from the other side. Then it returned to its neutral position. The smart lock app sent a notification. Manual override attempt detected. I checked the access log. 2:12 a.m. keycard ID, mine. I moved out the following week. Management waived the lease termination fee without argument. That unsettled me more than anything else. I asked the manager one last question before leaving. Has anyone else reported this? She hesitated. Then, previous tenant of your unit requested early termination, cited discomfort. With what? She didn't specify. I now live in a smaller building. Older, less automated. Fewer cameras, no service elevator. Last month, I received a push notification from the old building's app. I'd forgotten to uninstall it. It was a generic system update alert. But below it was a thumbnail image preview, a still frame from a hallway camera, floor 37. Outside my old unit, time-stamped 2:12 a.m. The man was standing there, facing the camera. Alone. The unit has been vacant for 6 months. And according to the building's public leasing page, it still is. Story 2, the corrected center. The condo was 38 floors above Brickell Avenue, wrapped in hurricane glass and reflective enough that during the day, it looked like sky pretending to be architecture. I moved in because it was new. No previous owners, no lingering smells, no stories embedded in drywall. After the divorce, I wanted surfaces that hadn't absorbed anyone else's voice. The place came fully integrated. Smart locks, climate control, automated blinds, app-monitored lighting, everything logged, everything trackable. Predictability felt like relief. The first change was small enough that I nearly respected it. I keep my keys in a shallow ceramic bowl beside the front door. It's muscle memory. Enter, drop, exhale. On the 4th evening there, I came home and found them on the kitchen island. Not dropped, not scattered. Placed in the center of the quartz surface, I stood there with my work bag still over my shoulder, replaying that morning. I don't walk to the island before leaving. I go straight out. But certainty is a fragile thing when you live alone. I moved them back without thinking too much about it. 2 nights later, one of the bar stools was pulled out halfway. They're identical matte black, square legs, always aligned evenly beneath the counter. I'm careful about that. Lines matter. The middle stool was angled slightly outward. It's just enough to disrupt symmetry. I pushed it back into place and continued unpacking boxes. The condo made no sound other than the faint hum of air cycling through vents. By the end of the first week, I began photographing the room before leaving for work. Not obsessively, just quick snapshots. Kitchen, living room, entryway. A private reference against faulty memory. When I came home Friday evening, the right stool wasn't pulled out. It was rotated a few degrees clockwise. Side-by-side comparison with the morning photos showed the difference clearly. Subtle, deliberate. The building security logs showed no additional entries into my unit. I checked. Front door opened. 7:32 a.m. Front door opened. 6:08 p.m. No gaps. No unknown access fobs. The place was secure, which left either mechanical explanation or me. I chose mechanical. The bathroom mirror cabinet was open one morning. Only an inch. The hinge is soft. Close. It doesn't drift. Inside, everything was in its place. Razor medication, spare toothpaste aligned in the organizer tray. I closed it gently and watched it seal with its magnetic click. It felt like closing someone else's hand. The first sound happened while I was home. I was on the couch reading when I heard ceramics slide across stone. I didn't react immediately. The fruit bowl on the island was closer to the edge than before, not near enough to fall, just near enough to notice. I stared at it. Waited for gravity to continue the job. Didn't. I stood, pushed it back to center, and returned to the couch. My pulse hadn't changed. I began waking at 3:17 a.m., not to noise, to awareness. The air felt denser at that hour, as though the temperature had shifted without actually cooling. On the 3rd night of this pattern, I kept my eyes closed and listened. From the kitchen, a faint scrape. Would leg against tile, then stillness. I didn't investigate. The indentation on the couch was new. The far right cushion sinks easily. I avoid sitting there. One morning, it was compressed dead center, as though someone had been upright and patient. I pressed my hand into the foam. It resisted, then slowly gave. Foam retains shape, I told myself. It was a practical explanation. The first time something moved while I watched, I felt something colder than fear. The cabinet above the sink opened slowly. No slam, no drama, just a smooth arc outward. I was standing at the island, chopping vegetables, knife in hand. I watched the door reach full extension. Pause, then close. The magnet clicked into place. I finished chopping. After that, the movements happened only in proximity. If I stood at the sink, the drawer behind me would ease open. If I sat on the couch, the adjacent cushion would compress. Not violently, not aggressively, just enough to imply adjacency. It felt less like haunting and more like cohabitation. I tested it. Left a kitchen drawer open 2 inches before leaving for work. Returned home, closed. I angled the coffee table deliberately off-center on the rug. That evening, it was squared perfectly with the grout lines in the tile. The condo wasn't chaotic. It was corrective. It adjusted to my preferences. Shoes aligned more evenly than I'd placed them. Dish towels folded tighter. Bar stools mathematically equidistant. I started feeling inefficient, like a temporary occupant being gently edited. The balcony incident changed the tone. I stepped outside to take a call. Slider was open behind me. When I finished and reached for the handle, it wouldn't move. The manual latch one I never used was engaged. 38 floors above ground, my palm rested against the glass while my living room sat just beyond reach. I didn't panic. After 10 seconds, the latch lifted with a clean metallic click. The door slid open easily. I went back inside and locked it manually. It didn't unlock again. The presence developed rhythm. Late evenings, kitchen and living room, and never the guest bedroom. I moved a stool deliberately out of alignment and sat down to watch television. 5 minutes later, it scraped back into place. The movement happened in my direct line of sight. No visible force, just motion. It began responding to disruption. If I left something slightly off-center, the air felt heavier, not colder. Pressurized. When I corrected it myself, the pressure eased. I stopped inviting people over. Variables complicated the pattern. One night, lying awake at 3:17 a.m., I felt weight settle near my feet on the couch. Subtle depression in the cushion, present. Still, I kept my breathing steady. After nearly a minute, the pressure lifted. The cushion slowly returned to form. I spoke once. Stop. The thermostat dropped 2 degrees immediately. The timing felt deliberate. I didn't repeat it. Silence seemed preferable to dialogue. The first object it relocated while I watched was my phone. I placed it beside my plate on the island, turned to the sink. When I turned back, it was gone. No sound, no fall. I found it upright inside the empty wine glass on the counter, balanced carefully. Screen black. I left it there overnight. It began adjusting larger things. Couch shifted forward a few inches. Coffee table edged closer. Not enough to notice instantly, but enough that my knees brushed wood when I stood. The room felt smaller, compressed around a different center. I pushed everything back. Couch flush against the wall. Rug centered. Stools deliberately uneven. I stood in the kitchen and waited. For a long time, nothing moved. Then the first stool slid softly into line. A minute later, the second. The third remained angled. I went into the bedroom and pulled the duvet halfway off the bed. Left drawers slightly open, returned to the living room. Everything was aligned again. Sharper than before. More precise. The third stool had corrected itself. The adjustments became immediate when I resisted. If I rotated something out of place, it corrected within minutes. If I left it alone, it maintained. It wasn't random. It was reactive. A feedback loop. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. The couch felt more honest. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to find the coffee table touching my knees. It had moved during the night, the couch too. The entire living room had shifted several inches toward me. The walls hadn't changed, but the geometry had. I stood and began moving things back again. This time, as I pushed the couch, resistance met me. Not physical force, just weight, as though the floor beneath it didn't agree. I forced it into place anyway. When I stepped back, the air felt tight, like the moment before a storm breaks. The overhead lights flickered. Not off, not on, just a tremor. The cabinet above the sink opened. then the one beside it, then the drawer below. All at once. Not violently. Simply open. Waiting. I stood in the center of the kitchen. Pressure in the room intensified. I understood then. It wasn't correcting furniture. It was correcting space. The couch shifted without sound, sliding 2 inches forward, then 2 more. The rug straightened itself under it. The coffee table centered precisely with the couch's new position. The island stools aligned with that axis. The room had chosen its geometry, and I was standing off-center. I stepped to the exact middle of the tile grid, measured visually against grout lines. The pressure eased slightly. When I moved a foot to the left, it tightened. I adjusted again. Centered, the sensation subsided. The cabinet doors closed simultaneously. The room exhaled. I stayed there for nearly an hour, perfectly centered, testing if I shifted too far in any direction. Something adjusted, a stool scraping, the couch nudging forward, the air thickening. It wasn't aggression, it was calibration. The condo was arranging itself around a fixed point, not furniture, not walls, me. The next morning I made a decision. I packed only essentials, clothes, documents, laptop. I left everything else exactly as it preferred. Before leaving, I stood in the center of the living room one final time. Space felt balanced, satisfied. When I stepped deliberately toward the front door, the bar stool scraped violently out of alignment for the first time. Sharp, unmistakable. I didn't stop walking. The overhead lights dimmed slightly as I reached the entryway. The ceramic key bowl sat empty. My keys were in my pocket. I opened the door. Behind me, every piece of furniture shifted at once. Not chaotic, not crashing. Just sliding several inches toward the center point where I had been standing, correcting the vacancy. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door closed. The lock engaged with a clean digital tone. From inside, muted through insulated walls, I heard one final adjustment. A heavy object dragging into precise alignment, then nothing. I never went back. 2 months later, I saw the listing online. Perfectly balanced layout, the description read. The photos showed the living room stage differently, but something was familiar. Every image had been taken from the exact center of the room. Story 3. The gate that wasn't there. I worked the overnight shift at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Most people assume airports close. They don't. They thin out. The lights dim slightly. The shops shutter. The announcements slow. But the building remains awake in a different way. Mechanical, patient, waiting for morning. I prefer nights. Fewer passengers. Less noise layered over noise. I start to hear the building itself. My job is simple. Facilities response. If something breaks between 11 p.m. and 5 o'clock a.m., I'm the one who checks it. Faulty escalator sensor. Restroom plumbing issue. Security door not latching. The airport is a grid of corridors, gates, service hallways, and maintenance passages that most travelers never see. I know it well enough to walk it without looking at signage, or I thought I did. The first irregularity was a work order. Gate N17 lighting issue. Time logged. 2:13 a.m. N17 is a real gate. North Satellite. I've replaced bulbs there before, but N17 wasn't active that night. No scheduled departures until 5:40 a.m. Still, a lighting issue isn't unusual. I grabbed a ladder and headed down the corridor. The North Satellite at 2 o'clock a.m. feels like a museum of paused motion, empty gate seating. Jet bridges sealed to glass, digital boards cycling through departure times that are hours away. N17. It was dark when I approached. Not unlit, dark. The overhead fluorescents above the gate seating were off entirely, while the neighboring gates glowed softly. I checked the panel behind the counter. Breaker wasn't tripped. When I stepped into the seating area, the lights flicked on. Not gradually. Instantly. Bright, sterile white. I stood still for a moment, hand on the ladder. Motion sensors, I told myself. Though these weren't motion-controlled fixtures, I replaced one bulb anyway, logged it as resolved. The second work order came the next night. Gate N17, temperature irregularity. Time logged, 2:11 a.m. Close enough to the previous night's timestamp to catch my attention. I checked the system. No temperature fluctuation registered. Still, I walked down. The corridor felt longer that night. It's not poetic exaggeration. I mean physically longer. I've walked that stretch hundreds of times. I know how many ceiling panels pass overhead before you reach the bend. It took more. N-17's display board was on when I arrived. Flight 482 boarding. There was no Flight 48 scheduled anywhere in the system at that hour. I checked my handheld device. Nothing. The seating area was empty. No luggage, no gate agent, but the boarding status pulsed softly on the screen. I stepped behind the counter. The gate computer monitor was black, powered down. The display above the seating flickered once and changed to Final Call. The jet bridge door was sealed, no aircraft attached. I felt something unfamiliar, then not fear. Displacement, like I had stepped half a second out of sync with the building. The next morning I asked operations about Flight 482. They checked archived flight logs. No such flight in the past week, no reroutes, no charters. I didn't press. Airports generate strange glitches, sometimes desk displays, phantom data. Still, I wrote down the number in my notebook. Night 3, no work order. But at 2:14 a.m., the overhead speakers in my sector emitted a soft chime. The kind that precedes announcements, then silence. 5 seconds later, a voice began speaking. It wasn't garbled. It wasn't distorted. It was calm. Now boarding all remaining passengers for Flight 482. The voice didn't match any of our recorded announcers. It sounded almost close, as if spoken from just behind me rather than through speakers. I was standing near gate N16 when it happened. I turned slowly toward N17. Its seating lights were on again, brighter than the rest of the corridor. The display read, "Gate closed." I walked down deliberately. The carpet felt softer under my boots, the air slightly warmer. When I reached the seating area, the lights shut off. Total darkness. The corridor behind me remained lit. I stood at the threshold between light and shadow. A radio crackled. Static. And a faint tone like a boarding pass scanner. I did not step fully inside. I backed away instead. The lights came back on as soon as I crossed into the main corridor. Bright, normal. The display above N17 now showed a scheduled 6:05 a.m. departure to San Diego. Legitimate, real. The pattern continued for 4 nights. 2:11 to 2:15 a.m. N17 would activate in some way, display, lighting, audio. No system record of it afterward. No maintenance log besides the original one. The timestamps matched within a 2-minute range each time, always when foot traffic was 0. I began arriving at the corridor early. 2:05 a.m. Waiting. At 2:12 a.m., the temperature shifted slightly. Not enough to trigger HVAC sensors. Enough to feel. The corridor lights dimmed subtly. N17 illuminated. The display read, "On time, destination, blank." On the 7th night, there were seats occupied. Not clearly, not solid, but impressions. The way fabric dips when weight rests on it. Several chairs along the center row were depressed, perfectly aligned, facing the jet bridge door. I stopped 10 feet short. The boarding chimes sounded again. Final call for Flight 482. The voice was clearer now, close enough that I could hear breath between words. The jet bridge door clicked, unlocked. It opened 3 inches, no aircraft beyond the glass. It's just darkness where the plane should have been. Thick and depthless. My radio crackled. Dispatch asking for status on a restroom leak in Concourse C. Normal, routine. The sound grounded me. When I looked back at N17, the seating was flat again. Door sealed. Lights steady. I checked the airport maps in the administrative system. There's no N17, there's N16, there's N18. The numbering skips. It always has. I had never noticed. The physical sign above the gate read N17, but on the official schematics, that space is labeled Storage N16B. Not a passenger gate. Not in active use. I accessed archived blueprints from before the 2004 renovation. There had been an N17 once, decommissioned after structural reconfiguration, absorbed into adjacent space. No recorded incidents, just removal. At 2:13 a.m. that night, I stood directly in front of the gate counter. The display activated. Flight 482, boarding. Passengers began appearing, not forming, not materializing, becoming noticeable, as though they had always been there and the lighting had just adjusted to reveal them. Seated, facing forward. Still, their features were indistinct, not blurred, not shadowed, simply undefined, like faces glimpsed through moving water. All oriented toward the jet bridge door, waiting. The boarding chime sounded again. No voice this time, just the tone. One of the seated shapes stood. It moved toward the door. Its motion was smooth, unhurried. When it reached the threshold, it did not open the door. It passed through it. Into the dark beyond, the others followed, one by one. No footsteps, no sound of fabric. Each figure dissolving into the absence beyond the glass. The seating slowly rising as weight left it. I didn't move. I didn't intervene. Did not feel like my place too. When the last seat lifted back to its untouched shape, the display changed. Gate closed. The lights dimmed. The corridor temperature normalized. My radio buzzed with a routine check-in from dispatch. I responded normally, voice steady, professional. When I looked up again, the sign above the gate read Storage N16B. Plain metal letters. No digital board, no counter, just a locked maintenance door. I requested reassignment 2 weeks later. Cited scheduling preferences. Didn't mention gates that appear only at 2:13 a.m. before leaving the North Satellite for the last time. I walked the corridor once more. There is no physical space for a gate between N16 and N18, only wall. Sometimes when I'm on shift in a different concourse, I hear the boarding chime faintly through the building. Always at 2:13 a.m. Never logged, never acknowledged. I checked archived accident reports out of curiosity last month. There was a chartered flight 482 scheduled out of Seattle in 1998. It never departed. Gate assignment listed as N17. The departure time was 2:15 a.m. No further details were accessible. I don't work nights anymore. But when I pass through the North Satellite during the day, I always glance at the wall between N16 and N18. There's no sign. There's no counter. No seating. Just blank space. Still, I never stand there too long. Because sometimes, just for a second, the carpet in front of that wall looks slightly compressed, as if people are already waiting. Story 4, the 6th floor edition. I never thought I'd return to Massachusetts General Hospital after my mother died there. It wasn't about the trauma, really. It was just practical. Hospitals have a way of compressing time. After you've made enough visits, every single corridor feels like a memory you'd rather not reopen, a door you'd rather keep closed. But when I was offered a position as an overnight clinical documentation auditor in the gray building, I took it. Night work suited me. There's less conversation, fewer eyes on you. I told myself that this building wasn't the same wing she'd been in. That detail mattered, at least on paper. It gave me the distance I needed. My shift runs from 7 in the evening to 3:30 in the morning. After midnight, the hospital transforms. It becomes procedural. Machines hum their constant low rhythm. The rubber soles of nurses' shoes move quietly across the polished floors. Conversations become murmurs, confined to the glow of the nurses' stations. My job is to review electronic records. I look for missing signatures, incomplete discharge summaries, and mismatched timestamps. It's meticulous work, precise. And in its own strange way, it's comforting. It's a world of clean data and solvable problems. The first irregularity was numerical. It was just after midnight, 12:42 a.m., to be exact, when room 642 appeared on my intake reconciliation list. The patient's name was Eleanor Whitman, age 72. Admit time, 12:41 a.m. The name alone made my throat tighten. My mother's name was Eleanor. She was 72 when she passed away. Still, I told myself, Eleanor Whitman isn't a rare name. It's a coincidence. I clicked the record to review the chart, but the system stalled for a moment, then displayed a simple message: room inactive. I figured it was just a delayed sync error. Hospitals run on these overlapping, tangled systems: bed management, electronic health records, transport scheduling. Sometimes they just misalign for a moment. I refreshed the screen. Just like that, room 642 vanished. The list renumbered itself cleanly, going from 641 straight to 643. There was no gap. I made a mental note to mention it to the IT department during daytime hours, but I never did. The following night at 12:43 a.m., it happened again. Same room reappeared on my list. Room 642, admission pending documentation. This time, there was even less information. No attending physician assigned, no nursing notes, no scanned ID. Only a timestamp. I leaned back in my chair and pulled up the floor directory. 6th floor, gray building. Rooms 601 through 641 on one side, and 643 through 660 on the other. Officially, there is no room 642. Later that night, around 1 a.m., I took a break to stretch my legs. I walked down the 6th floor corridor. At this hour, it's controlled and quiet. It's the cardiac step-down unit, so the lighting is low, and the monitors beside each door are soft and steady. I found the spot between room 641 and room 643. There was a wide structural column there, the hand sanitizer dispenser mounted on it. No door, not even enough space for one. I stood in front of that ordinary-looking column for longer than I should have, just staring. The next shift at 12:44 a.m., my monitor chimed softly. A new alert. Vitals alert, room 642. Heart rate, 41 beats per minute. Blood pressure, 88/50. The numbers were low, and they were fluctuating. I quickly checked the central monitoring dashboard, the main system view for the entire floor. No such room existed there. No active patient matched those vitals. But the alert window, my alert remained open on my screen. It felt directed, personal. I didn't notify the charge nurse. What was there to report? Ghost in the machine? Instead, I got up and walked back into the corridor. The structural column between 641 and 643 looked different. Not dramatically, but something had changed. The hand sanitizer dispenser was gone. In its place was a flush, white door. No number, no window. Just a door. Now, hospitals are modular. Temporary doors get installed during renovations all the time. I told myself it was just construction. I approached it carefully. The paint looked fresh. The handle was cold, stainless steel. It had no signage. And from the other side, I could hear the faintest rhythmic sound. The gentle push of air through tubing. Oxygen. I told myself this was a memory response. The hospital, the late hour, the name Eleanor, it had all layered together into something my mind was inventing. Still, I raised my hand and pressed it lightly against the door. It was cooler than the surrounding wall. Not icy, just cool enough to notice. Just then, a nurse rolled a medication cart past me. She didn't look toward the door. She didn't hesitate at all. If she saw it, she gave no sign. As she passed, it seemed like the hallway lighting grew dimmer right around the door's frame, muted at the edges. Then, the overhead paging system chimed softly. Respiratory consult to room 642. The announcement sounded completely normal. Standard tone, standard cadence. I glanced over toward the nurse's station. No one reacted. No one checked a chart. The corridor remained procedurally calm, as if nothing had happened. The door opened inward without any resistance. The room beyond was fully formed. Hospital beds sat centered under soft overhead lighting. An IV pole stood beside it. A cardiac monitor was active. And there was a window, large window facing the Charles River, an orientation that was completely impossible from this wing of the hospital. The air inside felt heavier, and the sound was dampened. A woman lay in the bed. She wore a white hospital gown and an oxygen cannula. Her eyes were closed. Her hair was thinner than I remembered, with more gray at the temples. But the line of her jaw, the shape of her hands resting on the blanket, it was my mother. I didn't rush forward. I stepped inside carefully, as if I were intruding on a private, delicate procedure. The monitor displayed her heart rate, 42 beats per minute. Oxygen saturation, 84%. The waveform trembled irregularly. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, but also something softer underneath it, the lavender lotion she had used for years. I moved to the side of the bed. Her breathing was shallow, but it was steady. There were no nurses in the room. No IV medications were running. The whole scene felt paused. Not abandoned, just paused. "Mom," I said quietly. The word felt restrained, almost professional. Her eyelids fluttered open. She looked right at me, without any confusion or surprise. "You're early," she said. Her voice was just as I remembered it from her final days, thin but composed. "I work here now," I replied. It felt absurd, explaining my job inside a room that shouldn't exist. Her gaze shifted slightly toward the doorway. "This isn't your floor," she said. The monitor beside her dipped to 39 beats per minute. The numbers unsettled me more than her presence. They were mirroring the last hour of her life. I had left the hospital that night at 12:30 a.m., completely exhausted. She died at 1:58 a.m. I wasn't there. The monitor tone softened into a low warning. 36 beats per minute. "You left," she said. There was no accusation in her voice. It was just a statement of fact. "I thought you were stable," I answered. The explanation sounded so hollow, so empty now. The oxygen reading dropped to 80%. The overhead paging system spoke again. "Family to room 642, but out in the corridor, no one reacted." The hallway beyond the open door looked slightly distorted, like heat rising from pavement in the summer. The light out there seemed too bright compared to the muted room I was in. I stepped closer to the bed. Her hand was resting on the blanket. I hesitated for a second before touching it. When I did, it felt real. Cool, but living. Her fingers tightened faintly around mine. "You don't need to fix it," she said. The monitor dipped again, 2:34. "I'm not trying to fix anything," I replied, my voice shaking a little. The numbers kept falling. 32, "You stayed until the end," she said. "It wasn't true." "I didn't," I answered. "I wasn't here." The monitor alarm sharpened. Her eyes remained steady on mine. "You were," she said softly. The statement didn't feel like a correction. It felt like a clarification. The oxygen level flickered between 76 and 78%. The room seemed to be getting smaller, the air heavier. I left before I began to explain again. "You stayed," she repeated. She wasn't arguing. She was simply stating it. The monitor flattened for a brief, terrifying moment, then resumed at 28. The sound was clinical and final. The overhead voice spoke one last time. "Room 642 discharge processing." The word discharge echoed strangely in the muted air, and in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about reliving her death. It was about the last version of it that existed inside of me. I had rewritten that night 100 times what I should have said, when I should have stayed. The guilt I carried. "I'm here now," I said. It was the only accurate sentence I had. Her breathing steadied just slightly. The monitor climbed. 35 beats per minute, then 41. The alarm softened. The heaviness in the room eased, bit by bit. Her hand relaxed in mine. "We could go home," she said. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a release. The monitor reached 60. Normal. The oxygen reading stabilized. Her eyes closed gently. When I stepped backward, the room's lighting brightened to standard hospital fluorescence. The window facing the river was gone. The bed was empty. The monitor was powered down. The doorway stood open to the 6th-floor corridor, and between 641 and 643, there was only the structural column again, with the hand sanitizer dispenser mounted neatly in its place. Room 642 does not exist in any hospital record. It hasn't appeared on my dashboard since that night. I still work the overnight shift. Occasionally around 1:58 a.m., my intake board will flicker once before refreshing cleanly. No room number, no patient name, just a ghost of a glitch. And I no longer replayed the moment I walked out of the hospital all those years ago, because whatever version of that night I was holding on to was discharged. And some rooms, I think, only appear long enough to close what they were built for. Story 5. Unit C-17. I rented the storage unit 3 months after selling the house. The divorce agreement was efficient, clinical. We divided what we could and boxed what we couldn't. Some things didn't belong to either of us cleanly. Old photo albums, my grandfather's tools. Wedding gifts neither of us wanted, but neither threw away. I chose a climate-controlled facility in North Phoenix. Clean concrete corridors, LED strip lighting, digital keypad entry, temporary space, I told myself. Unit C-17 sat midway down the second hallway. Metal roll-up door, standard padlock, no window. Inside, labeled plastic bins stacked 3 high along the left wall. A small bookshelf. A dismantled dining chair. 2 sealed garment bags. Nothing dramatic, nothing volatile, just deferred decisions. I visited once every few weeks, mostly to reassure myself the contents were intact. The facility required a keypad code to enter the building and a separate lock for each unit. Cameras at every corner. The first irregularity was a box slightly out of alignment. One of the plastic bins on the middle stack had shifted forward an inch. I assumed settling. Arizona heat warps things. On my next visit, the same bin was pushed back, flush against the others. I didn't remember correcting it. I stood there trying to reconstruct the previous visit. Memory in storage units feels unreliable. Everything smells like dust and insulation. I dismissed it. 2 weeks later, the metal folding chair I kept against the back wall was unfolded. Not dramatically, just opened and positioned facing the doorway. I never sit inside the unit. There's nowhere to sit, really. I folded it again and leaned it back against the wall. The facility manager confirmed no unauthorized entries. My access code had been used only on the dates I visited. Cameras showed no one entering C-17 except me. He offered to review footage, but I declined. I didn't want to escalate a minor irregularity into something procedural. The third occurrence involved something more specific. A small wooden jewelry box sat inside one of the bins. It had belonged to my ex-wife's mother. We'd agreed I would hold on to it until she decided what to do with it. When I opened the bin to check something else, the jewelry box was sitting on top of the lid, centered, closed. I hadn't removed it. I stood inside the unit longer than usual that day. The air was cool from the climate system, faintly humming overhead. The corridor beyond the roll-up door was empty, uniform gray concrete stretching both directions. I picked up the jewelry box and returned it to the bin. Closed the lid firmly. The next visit, the roll-up door resisted when I tried to lift it, as though something inside pressed against it. Not heavy, just tension. When it finally opened, the folding chair was positioned directly behind the door, blocking it, seat facing outward into the corridor. I moved the chair aside slowly. Nothing else appeared disturbed. The bins were stacked properly, the bookshelf untouched. I stepped fully inside and pulled the door halfway down behind me. The interior felt narrower than usual, not physically smaller, constrained. I began testing it deliberately. I placed the folding chair sideways against the left wall before leaving. On my next visit, it stood upright against the back wall. Facing the doorway, I rearranged 2 bins out of order, swapping labels. When I returned, they had been restored to their original positions. The labels matched my previous system. I had not corrected them. The restoration felt purposeful. The movements remained contained. Nothing damaged, nothing thrown, only repositioned, as if the unit preferred a specific arrangement. I considered installing a personal camera inside, then reconsidered. I wasn't sure I wanted confirmation. One evening, just before closing hours, I stayed longer than usual, sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor. The roll-up door half open, the corridor quiet. I spoke without thinking. "This is temporary." The words sounded smaller than intended. Behind me, something shifted. The jewelry box slid across the bin lid, slowly stopping at the edge. I didn't turn immediately. I let the sound complete itself. When I looked, the box rested half an inch from falling, perfectly balanced. The next visit, more items had moved. The dismantled dining chair was assembled, not fully tightened, but upright, positioned beside the folding chair, both facing inward, toward the stacked bins, as if observing. I disassembled the chair again, left the legs detached, placed them in separate bins. When I returned, the legs were laid neatly beside the seat, aligned for reattachment. The folding chair stood open again, facing the doorway. The pattern began correlating with specific objects. When I opened the bin containing photo albums, the folding chair would reposition closer. When I closed it, the chair would move back. Not immediately, but within minutes. I started leaving the door open to watch. The jewelry box became central. If I placed it deep inside a bin, it would reappear on top. If I set it on the shelf, it would return to the bin lid. Always centered, always closed. I brought the box home one night. Tested the theory, left it on my kitchen counter. Nothing moved. The next time I opened Unit C-17 without it present, the folding chair was overturned on its side. First instance of something not placed carefully. I returned the jewelry box to the unit, placed it gently atop the bin. The folding chair stood upright again on my next visit, centered, facing inward. The correction felt conditional. I stopped pretending the movement was random. was protective, selective, focused on a single object. The jewelry box had contained my ex-wife's mother's wedding ring. We'd removed it after the funeral and never decided who should keep it. The ring still sat inside. One evening, I opened the jewelry box while sitting on the folding chair. The ring rested in its velvet slot, simple gold band, unremarkable. Behind me, the assembled dining chair shifted slightly, not falling, adjusting. "I'm not keeping it," I said aloud. The words echoed faintly in the corridor. The folding chair scraped forward 2 inches. Closer to the bin stack, the ring remained still. I closed the box and set it back down. The assembled chair creaked, one leg lifting briefly before settling again. The air inside the unit felt denser, charged, but not hostile, insistent. I understood then. The movement wasn't about arrangement. It was about custody. The ring didn't belong in storage, didn't belong in indecision. The unit had become a holding space for something unresolved. The next visit, I brought a small padded envelope. I placed the jewelry box inside it, sealed it, wrote my ex-wife's name and address on the front. Set the envelope atop the bin. The folding chair remained still. The assembled chair did not shift. I waited. Nothing moved. The air felt neutral for the first time, unweighted. I carried the envelope out of the unit and into the corridor. Closed the roll-up door behind me. There was no resistance. After mailing the package, I returned to Unit C-17 one final time before ending the lease. The interior was exactly as I'd left it. Chairs folded and leaning against the wall, bins aligned, no objects repositioned. The space felt ordinary, vacant in the way storage units should feel. I emptied the remaining contents 2 weeks later. C-17 now sits available for rent, according to the facility's website. Sometimes I wonder if the movement was grief attaching itself to objects or guilt seeking order. But nothing in my house shifts now. Nothing repositions itself overnight. And when my ex-wife called to confirm she received the ring, her voice was steady. She said she'd been meaning to ask for it. She just hadn't known how. Unit C-17 stopped moving after that. Whatever insisted on alignment inside those concrete walls had been waiting for one decision. Once made, it no longer needed the space. Story 6. The second set of footsteps. I picked the trail because it looked empty on the map. No cabins, no lake, no popular view at the end. Just a long stretch through trees that climbed toward a ridge and came back down the same way. 14 miles total. That sounded like enough time to clear my head. I drove up early to avoid other hikers. When I reached the parking lot, there were no other cars, just mine and a wooden sign with a faded trail map nailed to it. The air felt thin but clean, the kind of air that makes your lungs work a little harder. I locked my car, adjusted my backpack, and started walking. The dirt path was dry and packed down, small rocks pressed into it. Every step made a steady crunch. That sound stayed with me. For the first 30 minutes, nothing happened. I focused on breathing, on the rhythm of my boots, on the slow rise of the trail. Pine trees stood on both sides. No houses, no fences. No road noise. Just wind moving through branches now and then. The first time I heard the other step, I thought it was my own echo. A second crunch that came half a second late. I kept walking. The sound came again. Crunch, crunch, mine first. Then another. Behind me. I didn't turn around, not right away. I told myself someone else had started the trail after me. Maybe they parked while I was already walking. That made sense. This was public land. Anyone could use it. The steps stayed steady, not fast, not slow. When I adjusted my pace, they adjusted too. If I slowed, they slowed. If I stepped over a rock, I heard the same shift behind me, still far enough back that I couldn't see them. After a while, I stepped off the trail and pretended to retie my boot. The second set of steps stopped. I stayed crouched longer than needed. Then I stood and looked back. The trail behind me was empty. A long stretch of dirt between trees. No one there. I waited 30 seconds. 1 minute. Nothing moved. No branches shook. No voices. Told myself they must have stepped off the path too. Maybe using the bathroom. Maybe resting. That felt reasonable. I stepped back onto the trail. Crunch. Crunch. Then the second crunch again. Behind me, the sound returned as if it had never stopped. Tight feeling formed in my chest. Not fear exactly, just awareness. I kept walking. The path started to climb more steeply. Loose gravel rolled under my boots. Second set of steps followed, same rhythm. I stopped suddenly. No warning. The second step stopped too. I took one slow step backward. A crunch came from ahead of me. On the trail in front, clear, close, I froze. The sound had not come from behind this time. It came from somewhere ahead, but I saw no one. The path curved slightly uphill. Empty. Just dirt and rock. I walked forward again. The steps returned behind me, then to my left. A crunch on the slope above the trail. I turned quickly. Nothing. Just trees and dirt. My breathing sounded louder now. I tried to calm it. I tested the sound again. 3 quick steps. Pause. 2 slow steps. The second set copied me. Not perfectly, but close enough that it didn't feel random. I reached a small clearing with a fallen log across one side. I sat down to drink water. The clearing was open. If anyone walked in, I would see them. I listened. Nothing at first, then one single crunch from the tree line. It's not moving. Just one step. I stood slowly. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded thin in the open space. No answer came back. No movement. No sign of anyone hiding. I stepped back onto the trail. The path narrowed again. Steeper incline now. The sounds returned behind me, but closer this time, not far away. Maybe 10 steps back. I turned around again. Still no one. Clear line of sight. No hiker, no animal, no shifting branches. The ground showed only my footprints. Deep marks from my boots. No second set beside them. I crouched to look closer. The dirt was soft enough to show detail. My tread pattern was sharp. There were no other prints overlapping mine. No small ones, no large ones, just mine. When I stood up, I heard a step directly beside me. So close I felt it in my legs. Like someone had placed their weight into the ground next to my boot. I stepped away fast. Nothing stood there. My heart started beating harder now. I checked my phone. No signal. I already knew that, but seeing no service made it worse. I put it back in my pocket. I decided to turn back. 7 miles in meant 7 miles out. Plenty of daylight left. I started walking downhill. The steps followed again, but now they came from ahead. Each time I rounded a bend, I heard one crunch just beyond the curve, like someone staying just out of sight. The trail crossed a narrow wooden bridge over a shallow stream. I stepped onto it. The boards creaked under my weight, stopped halfway across. Silence. No second creak. No extra shift. I stepped off the bridge and waited. Nothing happened. No steps. No sound at all. Silence felt thicker than before. I almost wished the steps would come back. At least then, I knew where they were. I walked faster. Not running, but steady. The steps returned. Behind me again, closer than before. I could hear small gravel pieces move as if kicked aside. I stopped and shouted, "Stop." The word echoed once and faded. The steps stopped. I listened. My ears rang from the shout. Then I heard one slow step, directly in front of me. I looked down at the dirt, right there, just ahead of my toes. The ground pressed in slightly, as if weight had been placed there, but no footprint formed. No clear shape, just a shallow dip. I backed away slowly. The dip in the dirt lifted. The ground looked flat again, like nothing had touched it. My hands felt cold, even though the sun was still up. The rest of the walk back to the parking lot happened without sound. No steps, no gravel moving, nothing at all. That silence felt worse than the noise. When I reached the lot, my car was the only one there, exactly as I left it. I unlocked the door and got inside quickly. Locked it. Started the engine. Before pulling away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The empty trailhead sat behind me, still. Then I heard it. One clear crunch, on gravel, right behind my car. Close enough that it sounded like someone standing at the trunk. I didn't turn around. I drove. When I reached the highway, my phone regained signal. I almost convinced myself I imagined everything until that night. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of one single step. On the hardwood floor outside my bedroom, not walking, not pacing, just one step. And then the quiet returned. This time, It did not feel far away. Story 7. The Man Who Stayed in the Mirror. Rented the house in late October when the coast was nearly empty. I wanted quiet streets, closed shops, long walks without tourists. The place I found was a 2-story rental, 3 blocks from the beach, with peeling white paint and a narrow porch that looked plain enough to feel safe. Inside, the house felt older than the listing photos. The wood floors creaked in certain spots, and the simple furniture had clearly seen a lot of tenants. But nothing felt strange during the first few days. Upstairs, at the end of a short hallway, there was a small bathroom with a tall, narrow mirror above the sink, framed in dark wood. When I first unpacked, I remember glancing at myself in it, thinking only that the angles seemed slightly wider than most mirrors I'd used before. The first week passed in a steady routine. I worked from a small desk by the bedroom window during the day, made simple meals at night, and walked along the beach in the evening, returning to a house that felt quiet but normal. On the 4th night, I woke up just after 1 in the morning, feeling thirsty. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and for a split second, I saw a figure behind me in the mirror. I jumped before realizing it was just my own reflection, caught off guard by the sudden brightness. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at myself while my breathing slowed. Although nothing looked wrong, I felt a little embarrassed by how quickly my body had reacted to something so ordinary. The next morning, I noticed the mirror was angled differently. It was tilted just enough that I could see more of the hallway behind me when I stood at the sink. I reached up and adjusted it back, finding the screw firm, not loose at all. Later that same afternoon, when I went upstairs to grab my laptop charger, I saw from the hallway that the mirror had shifted again. This time it faced directly toward the open doorway, as if someone had carefully turned it to watch the hall. I stepped into the bathroom and checked the frame, pressing against it lightly to see if it would swing, but it resisted my touch. I told myself that old walls sometimes settle, and small changes in angle can happen. That night, I brushed my teeth while looking at the sink instead of the mirror. When I finally glanced up, my reflection matched me perfectly, blinking when I blinked, tilting its head exactly when I did. 2 quiet days followed. I almost forgot about the mirror, focusing on work calls and long walks by the water. On the 7th evening, I returned home after dark. From the bottom of the stairs, I noticed the upstairs bathroom light was already on. Even though I was certain I'd turned it off before leaving, I walked slowly down the hallway and saw that the mirror was straight again. But when I stepped into view, my reflection appeared slightly off-center, as if someone else had been standing at the sink just moments before. As soon as I moved closer, the reflection aligned with me. I tested it by leaning left and right, seeing it follow me exactly. It made me feel foolish for thinking something had been wrong. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, replaying the image of the off-center reflection in my head, telling myself it had only been the angle of the light or my own tired eyes. 3 nights later, while brushing my teeth again, I stopped moving on purpose. I held my eyes open, determined to see if anything unusual would happen. After several seconds, my reflection blinked, even though I had not. The blink was small and natural, the kind of motion you'd easily miss if you weren't watching for it. But I was certain I had kept my eyes open the entire time. I stepped back from the sink slowly. My reflection remained near the mirror for a fraction of a second longer before stepping back to, creating a delay that felt impossible to ignore. The next morning, the mirror once again faced the hallway, even though I'd left it straight the night before. This time, I tightened the screw harder than before until my hand hurt. Later that evening, as I walked past the open bathroom door, I saw movement inside before I had fully stepped into view, as if my reflection had already begun turning toward me. I tested this. I stood in the hallway and counted quietly to 3 before entering. At 2, I could see my reflection already positioned at the sink, even though I hadn't moved yet. When I finally stepped into the room, the reflection adjusted smoothly to match me, but the shift felt rehearsed, like it had been waiting for its cue. The following night, I covered the mirror with a towel, pressing the fabric tightly into the frame. When I returned an hour later, the towel lay folded neatly on the counter below. I covered it again, this time securing it with tape. Around 2 in the morning, I woke to a soft, sliding sound from the hallway that made my stomach tighten. I walked to the bathroom. The towel hung halfway down the mirror, the tape peeled at one corner, revealing my reflection staring directly at the doorway. I stood there, staring back, and without moving my own face, I watched the reflection's mouth curve upward into a slow smile that did not belong to me. I felt my throat tighten as I stepped backward. The reflection held its smile for 1 second longer before returning to a blank expression that matched mine. After that night, I avoided the upstairs whenever I could. I worked at the kitchen table and slept with my bedroom door closed. But I began hearing slow footsteps in the hallway outside my room after midnight. Each time, they would stop just outside my door, pause as if listening, and then move away again, without the sound of retreating down the stairs. One morning, I opened the bathroom door and saw not one but two figures in the mirror, both shaped like me. The second stood close behind the first, older and worn in ways I did not recognize. I turned quickly to check the hallway behind me. It was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the older version remained for a second longer before fading, leaving only my usual reflection. From that point on, the reflection no longer waited to copy me. Instead, it began moving just before I did, turning its head slightly ahead of my own motion, blinking moments before I felt the need to. I realized then that it wasn't reacting to me, but anticipating me, as though it knew what I would do before I chose to do it. One afternoon, I stood completely still for several minutes. While my body remained frozen, the reflection leaned closer to the glass and examined me with an expression that felt curious, not angry. Its eyes moved across my face as if studying details. Then it stepped back into position just as I felt my own body finally shift. That was when I understood. The mirror didn't need me standing in front of it. Whatever lived inside it was only pretending to follow my lead. I packed my belongings the next morning with shaking hands, deciding to leave the rental early. I carried most of my bags downstairs before forcing myself to walk past the bathroom one last time. From the hallway, I could see the mirror clearly. In it, I saw myself already standing at the sink, even though I was still several feet from the doorway. The reflected version slowly turned its head toward me and smiled. Behind it, the older version stepped into view, placing one hand gently on its shoulder. I didn't enter the bathroom, didn't look away either. I just grabbed my final bag from the bedroom and walked downstairs without breaking into a run. I locked the house, returned the key through the rental office slot, and drove out of town without stopping, convinced that whatever was in that mirror belonged to that house alone. For weeks after moving into a modern apartment in the city, nothing unusual happened. I began to believe the experience had been tied to that specific place. Then, one night, as I passed the hallway mirror in my new apartment, I noticed my reflection continue walking even after I had stopped. It took 2 full steps inside the glass before pausing and slowly turning its head back toward me. I felt my breath catch as the reflection studied me with an expression that looked patient and calm. When it finally stepped back into alignment with my body, I saw faint lines on its face that I did not yet have. Over the following days, I began noticing small changes in my own reflection. Slight marks on my skin and a tired look around my eyes that seemed deeper in the mirror than in real life. Sometimes when I blinked, the reflection kept its eyes open just long enough for me to feel that I was the one trying to catch up. I've stopped covering mirrors because it makes no difference. Instead, I limit how long I look at them, never holding eye contact with myself for more than a few seconds. Now when I pass reflective windows at night, I sometimes see him standing a fraction ahead of me, moving just before I do. I no longer wonder whether he is copying me or replacing me, because I have begun to feel that one day I will stand perfectly still, and he will just keep walking forward without ever coming back. Story 8. The Rest Stop That Stayed Open. I was driving through Nevada alone because I wanted the long stretch of road where nothing changes for hours. It's just flat land, low hills in the distance, and the steady sound of tires on pavement. And I had planned the trip without much thought beyond reaching the next state line before morning. Around midnight, I saw a sign for a rest stop 20 miles ahead. And since I had been driving for nearly 5 hours without stopping, I decided I would pull in there to use the bathroom and stretch my legs before continuing. The road leading into the rest stop was narrow and unlit, and when my headlights swept across the empty parking area, I saw only 2 picnic tables, a concrete bathroom building, and a single vending machine glowing near the entrance. There were no other cars parked anywhere. and the desert around the lot stretched wide and dark in every direction, with no houses or buildings visible beyond the reach of my headlights. I parked near the bathroom entrance and shut off the engine, and when the silence settled around me, it felt thick enough that I noticed my own breathing inside the car. The air outside was cool and dry, and the gravel under my shoes made a sharp crunch as I walked toward the building, glancing once toward the empty highway behind me. The restroom door was unlocked, and inside the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly while casting a flat white glow over the tiled floor and 3 closed stalled doors. I checked each stall out of habit, even though I already knew no one else was there, and after washing my hands, I looked at myself in the metal mirror above the sink, noticing nothing unusual beyond the tired look in my eyes. When I stepped back outside, I noticed something that made me pause, because the highway beyond the entrance road looked darker than before, as if my car headlights had never touched it. I told myself it was only my eyes adjusting to the change in light, and I walked toward the vending machine, thinking I might grab a bottle of water before leaving. The vending machine hummed steadily, and as I pressed a button for water, I heard the faint sound of another car engine somewhere behind me. I turned around expecting to see headlights entering the lot, but the parking area remained empty and still, with no sign of movement in any direction. The sound of the engine continued for a few seconds before cutting off abruptly, and I felt a small wave of confusion because there was no vehicle anywhere nearby. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and looked toward the entrance road, expecting to see taillights fading into the distance, but the road was empty and silent. When I turned back toward my car, I felt a brief sense that something had shifted in the parking lot, not visually, but in the way the space felt around me, as if I was no longer alone. I unlocked my car and opened the driver's door, but before getting in, I paused because I heard the sound of footsteps crossing the gravel behind me, steady and slow, moving in my direction. I turned quickly and saw nothing except the picnic tables and the bathroom building. Yet the footsteps continued for 2 more steps before stopping, as if someone had realized I was looking. I stood still beside my open car door and listened carefully. And after several seconds of silence, I closed the door again instead of getting in. Feeling a strange need to confirm what I had heard, I walked halfway across the parking lot toward the picnic tables, and as I moved, I heard another set of steps begin again, matching my pace but staying just far enough away that I could not pinpoint the direction. I stopped walking, and the footsteps stopped as well, leaving only the faint hum of the vending machine behind me. I tested the sound by taking 3 quick steps in a row, and after a short pause, 3 matching steps echoed somewhere to my left. My heart began to beat harder, and I told myself there had to be another person nearby, perhaps someone who had arrived without headlights on or parked farther down the entrance road. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but my voice carried into the open desert without drawing any answer back. When I walked back toward the bathroom building, I noticed that the light inside seemed brighter than before, casting a wider glow across the concrete walkway. I stepped inside again and checked the stalls, finding them empty just as before, but this time I heard the restroom door open and close behind me while I stood at the sink. I spun around immediately, but the door was shut and the room was empty, and the air inside felt slightly warmer than it had only minutes earlier. The fluorescent light flickered once, and in that brief, dim moment, I heard a single breath close to my right ear, steady and calm. I stepped backward until my back touched the wall, and when the light returned to full brightness, I saw nothing in the room except my own reflection in the metal mirror. I rushed outside and scanned the parking lot again, expecting to finally see another car or person, but the space remained completely empty. As I stood there, I heard the sound of a car door slam behind me, the same sharp metallic thud as my own, and when I turned toward my vehicle, I saw that my driver's side door was now closed, even though I was certain I had left it open. I walked to the car slowly and tested the handle, finding it locked, which meant the key fob had been pressed, even though it was still in my pocket and I had not touched it. When I unlocked the door and got inside, I felt a shift in the seat behind me, as if someone had just leaned forward and then settled back. I froze in place and stared into the rearview mirror, but the back seat was empty, with no movement visible anywhere inside the car. I started the engine quickly, and as the headlights came on, they illuminated the entrance road clearly, revealing no other vehicles in sight. Before pulling away, I heard the sound of another engine starting somewhere outside the car, matching the rhythm of mine but slightly delayed. I shifted into drive and rolled slowly toward the exit, and as I did, I heard gravel crunching behind me as if another car was following close behind. When I checked the rearview mirror again, I saw nothing except the empty lot growing smaller as I approached the highway. I turned onto the main road and began accelerating, and for a brief moment I saw a second pair of headlights in my side mirror. It was positioned exactly where another car would be if it were following me. I glanced again immediately, but the headlights were gone, leaving only the dark stretch of highway behind me. I drove for several miles without slowing, trying to convince myself that exhaustion had played tricks on my senses, and eventually I saw another sign for a rest stop ahead. The sign looked identical to the first one, with the same distance listed and the same simple symbol for restrooms, which made me check my navigation to confirm I was moving forward. My phone showed I had driven only 3 miles since leaving the previous rest stop, even though it felt like much longer. As I approached the second rest stop, my headlights illuminated a familiar entrance road, and I felt my stomach tighten when I saw the same vending machine glowing near the building. I slowed down and realized the layout was exactly the same as the one I had just left, with the same 2 picnic tables and the same concrete restroom structure. There were still no other cars parked anywhere, and the desert around the lot stretched out just as empty as before. I checked the time on my dashboard and saw that it still read 12:47 a.m., the exact time I had noticed before pulling into the first rest stop. I stayed inside my car this time, keeping the doors locked and the engine running. But after a few seconds, I heard the sound of footsteps crossing the gravel toward my driver's side door. The steps stopped just outside the window, and I felt the faint pressure of weight shifting against the side of the car as if someone were leaning on it. I stared straight ahead and refused to look to my left, gripping the steering wheel tightly while the engine continued idling. After several long seconds, the pressure lifted from the car and I heard the soft sound of footsteps moving away toward the vending machine, followed by the hum growing slightly louder as if someone had stepped in front of it. Without waiting for anything else to happen, I pressed the gas pedal hard and drove straight out of the lot, ignoring the stop sign at the exit and merging onto the highway at full speed. This time when I checked my mirrors, I did not see headlights behind me, but I could still hear the faint sound of another engine running somewhere beyond the reach of my vision. I drove for nearly an hour without stopping, and when I finally saw the lights of a small town ahead, I felt relief wash over me as I pulled into the first gas station I could find. The clerk inside looked up at me calmly as if nothing unusual had happened anywhere nearby. When I asked how far the nearest rest stop was, he told me there was only one on that stretch of highway, and it closed every night at 11. I did not argue with him, and I did not explain what I had seen. But when I stepped back outside to my car, I heard the faint crunch of gravel behind me once more, even though the gas station parking lot was paved. I got into my car slowly and checked the rearview mirror again. For a brief moment, I saw the empty rest stop parking lot reflected behind me instead of the gas station lights. The image lasted only a second before the reflection corrected itself, showing the gas pumps and dark road beyond. I left the town without staying the night, and I have not taken that highway again since. Sometimes when I drive alone at night and see a sign for a rest stop ahead, I feel a tightness in my chest and keep driving instead of pulling over, because I no longer believe that rest stop was a place meant for drivers to stop and rest. I am certain that if I had stayed any longer, whatever followed my footsteps across that gravel would have finally opened the car door and taken the seat beside me for the rest of the drive. Story 9. The voice outside the cabin. I rented the cabin because I wanted quiet, kind that only comes when the tourist season ends and the mountains empty out. And I told my sister I would be out of service for most of the week since the listing warned about poor reception. The drive up was longer than I expected, and once I left the main road, the narrow path twisted through trees so thick that even during the afternoon the light barely touched the ground. The cabin itself was small and plain, with a wooden porch, 2 front windows, and a single chimney rising from the roof, and there were no other houses visible anywhere nearby. The owner had left a key inside a lockbox, and after unlocking the door, I stepped into a living room that smelled faintly of dust and old wood. There was a couch facing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen behind it, and a short hallway leading to a bedroom and bathroom, and everything looked exactly like the photos online. I carried my bags inside and locked the door behind me, feeling satisfied with the quiet that settled around the place. The silence there felt different from city silence. because it wasn't filled with distant traffic or voices through walls. Just the faint movement of wind brushing through trees outside. I spent the afternoon unpacking, starting a small fire in the fireplace, and setting my phone on the kitchen counter, even though it showed only one weak bar of signal. By evening, the temperature dropped quickly, and the sky outside the front windows turned from pale gray to deep blue. I cooked a simple dinner and ate at the small table near the window, watching the tree line as darkness settled across the mountain. When I finished eating, I washed the dishes and checked my phone again, noticing I had missed a call from my sister earlier in the day. I tried calling her back, but the signal dropped before the call could connect, so I sent her a short text telling her I arrived safely. The message failed to send, and I told myself I would try again in the morning when the signal might be better. Around 9, I added another log to the fire and sat on the couch reading, listening to the soft crackle of wood burning. That was when I heard someone call my name from outside the cabin, in a voice that sounded exactly like my sister's. At first, I thought I had imagined it because there was no reason she would be anywhere near this place, and I knew she was supposed to be at work back home. A few seconds later, I heard it again, clearer this time, my name spoken in the same tone she used when trying to get my attention from another room. I stood up slowly and looked toward the front door, waiting for another sound that would explain it. The voice came again, softer now, saying my name followed by a short laugh that was unmistakably hers. My chest tightened, and I walked toward the window instead of the door, telling myself it had to be someone else who just happened to sound similar. I pulled the curtain aside carefully and looked out at the dark porch and the empty clearing beyond it. And there was no car parked outside, no flashlight beam, no movement anywhere between the trees. My phone buzzed suddenly on the kitchen counter, and the sound made me jump so hard, I nearly dropped the curtain. I rushed to it, hoping to see my sister's name on the screen. But there was no notification at all, only the same single bar of signal. Before I could think clearly, I heard knocking at the front door, 3 slow taps spaced evenly apart. I froze in place and listened, and after a pause, the knocking came again, followed by my sister's voice saying, "Open up." The tone was wrong this time, slightly flat, as if someone were repeating words they had memorized without understanding them. I walked quietly toward the door and stopped just short of unlocking it, pressing my ear against the wood. On the other side, I heard breathing, steady and patient, like someone waiting calmly. I stepped back and asked, "Who is it?" even though I already knew what voice I expected to answer. "It's me," the voice replied, using my sister's exact rhythm of speech, but the words felt empty. I asked how she found me, and there was a long silence before the voice said, "You told me." I knew that wasn't true, because I had never given her the address, only mentioned I would be somewhere in the mountains. The door handle shifted slightly, as if someone were testing it gently. I realized then that I had locked it earlier, and the sound of the handle moving made my hand shake. The voice outside began speaking again, repeating my name over and over, each time slightly faster than before. I backed away from the door and moved toward the fireplace, trying to think of what to do next. The knocking stopped suddenly, and for a few seconds there was no sound at all. Then I heard footsteps moving along the front porch, slow and deliberate, passing in front of the windows. I stayed still, watching the curtains without daring to move them again. The footsteps stopped directly outside the living room window, and I saw a faint shadow stretch across the curtain. The shadow did not look like a person standing upright, but something slightly too tall and narrow. The voice spoke again, but this time it was no longer my sister's. It shifted mid-sentence, breaking into a lower tone that did not belong to anyone I recognized. "Let me in," it said, but the words dragged unnaturally, as if forced through a throat not built for speech. I grabbed my phone and tried calling my sister again, even though I knew the signal would fail. To my surprise, the call connected immediately, and I heard her real voice on the other end asking if I was okay. I could still hear the other voice outside at the same time, repeating my name through the door. My sister's voice on the phone began to echo slightly, then distort, blending with the one outside. I pulled the phone away from my ear, and the screen flickered before going completely black. The fireplace suddenly went out as if someone had blown on it, leaving the cabin lit only by a single lamp near the couch. The front door rattled hard once, not like a knock this time, but like someone had thrown their weight against it. I ran down the hallway to the bedroom and locked that door too, even though I knew the cabin walls were thin. From the other side of the bedroom door, I heard footsteps entering the living room, though I never heard the front door open. The steps moved slowly across the wooden floor, pausing every few seconds, as if listening for where I had gone. Then I heard my own voice call out from the living room saying, "It's okay. You can come out." The words were spoken exactly the way I would say them, down to the slight pause before the last word. I covered my mouth to keep from responding, because the sound was so convincing that for a moment, I almost believed I had spoken. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom door, and the handle began to turn slowly. I held it from the inside, pressing all my weight against the door as the handle twisted back and forth. The voice outside shifted again, now blending my tone with my sister's, repeating simple phrases like it was practicing. After several long seconds, the handle stopped moving, and the footsteps retreated down the hallway. I waited without moving for what felt like an hour, listening to faint sounds of pacing in the living room. Eventually, the cabin grew completely silent again, and I realized I could no longer hear breathing, footsteps, or wind outside. I stayed in the bedroom until the first hint of pale light appeared through the small window near the ceiling. When morning came fully, I opened the bedroom door slowly and stepped into the hallway. The living room looked exactly as it had before, except the front door now stood slightly open. Cold mountain air drifted inside, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I approached the door carefully and looked outside, seeing no footprints on the porch and no signs that anyone had been there. My phone lay on the kitchen counter again, fully charged, showing a missed call from my sister at exactly 9:14 p.m. When I called her back, she answered immediately and told me she had tried reaching me the night before because she had a strange feeling. I wasn't safe. I did not tell her what happened in detail, only that I thought someone had been outside the cabin. She insisted I leave and come home, and this time I did not argue. I packed my bags quickly and stepped outside, locking the cabin behind me. As I walked to my car, I heard my name called once more from somewhere deep in the trees in my own voice. I did not look back, and I did not answer. While driving down the mountain road, I kept the radio on loudly to block out any other sounds. At one sharp turn, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing in the middle of the road behind me. It looked like me from a distance, wearing the same jacket I had on. When I blinked, the road was empty again. I reached the main highway without stopping and drove until I found a town with steady cell service. Even now, when my sister calls my name from another room, I hesitate before answering, because sometimes her voice carries a slight delay, like it is being repeated from somewhere just outside the walls. And late at night, when my phone rings unexpectedly, I wait to hear it twice before I pick up, just in case something else learned how to say my name first. Story 10. The Space Between the Walls. I moved into the rental house in late October. Because the price was lower than anything else in the area, I needed somewhere quiet where I could work remotely without interruption. The house sat at the end of a short cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood that looked older than the listings online had suggested. Most of the nearby houses had peeling paint or sagging fences, and only a few cars were parked in driveways during the day. The landlord handed me the keys in the driveway and left quickly, telling me to call if anything urgent came up, but mentioning that he preferred texts. Inside, the house smelled faintly stale, like it had been closed up for too long without proper ventilation. The layout was simple, with a living room in front, a kitchen behind it, and 3 small bedrooms down a narrow hallway. The floors creaked when I walked across them, but I told myself that was normal for a house built decades ago. The first night passed without issue, and I slept in the front bedroom facing the street. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up because I thought I heard a soft tapping sound inside the wall near my bed. I lay still, listening carefully, and after a few seconds, the sound stopped completely. I assumed it was pipes cooling down or maybe small animals in the crawl space beneath the house. The next morning, I checked the exterior walls for any obvious holes or damage, but didn't see anything unusual. Over the next few days, I focused on unpacking and setting up a workspace in the living room near the front window. Each evening, right after sunset, I noticed the house became noticeably quieter, as if the outside world pulled back farther than usual. That was when the tapping inside the walls started happening again, always from different spots. The tapping grew more rhythmic by the end of the first week, no longer random, but arranged in patterns that repeated every few minutes. Sometimes it sounded like 3 short taps followed by 1 longer scrape, always coming from the wall closest to wherever I was sitting. I pressed my ear against the drywall one night to listen more closely, and the sound stopped immediately. When I stepped away, it resumed after a short pause, as if something inside had been waiting for me to move. I contacted the landlord to ask if there had ever been issues with rodents, and he replied that the house had passed inspection before I moved in. I bought a small motion-activated camera and placed it in the hallway, pointing toward the bedroom doors. That same night, the tapping shifted from the hallway wall to the living room wall directly behind the couch. It no longer sounded small, and each knock carried a weight that didn't match the size of a mouse or rat. At around midnight, I heard what sounded like a slow, dragging movement between the walls, traveling from the kitchen toward the hallway. I followed the sound with my eyes, tracking it as it moved behind the drywall, like something crawling upright. The movement stopped directly behind the bathroom mirror. I stood in the bathroom doorway, staring at the mirror, waiting for some visible sign. The glass trembled slightly, not enough to crack, but enough to make me step backward. I told myself I was imagining it, but my reflection looked strained, as if I had been holding my breath for too long. That night, I reviewed the footage from the hallway camera. The video showed nothing unusual at first, just empty hallways and closed doors. Then, at 1:13 a.m., the wall beside the guest bedroom appeared to shift slightly inward, like something pressing from the other side. The drywall bent subtly before returning to normal shape. There was no visible tear or hole, just a brief inward bulge. The next day, I ran my hand along that section of wall and felt a faint warmth radiating from it. I knocked lightly against it, and a second knock answered from inside, matching my rhythm exactly. I stepped back immediately, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. That evening, the tapping started earlier than usual, just after sunset. It wasn't random anymore, and this time it sounded like knuckles against drywall. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. I decided to test something, and I knocked back twice. The response came instantly, to knocks from inside the wall. I felt a wave of cold spread through my arms and into my chest. I tried speaking softly toward the wall, asking if someone was there. For several seconds, there was no answer. Then I heard a faint whisper from inside the wall, too distorted to make out clearly. The whisper carried a rough edge, like someone speaking through insulation. I pressed my ear against the drywall again, despite knowing I shouldn't. The whisper grew clearer and formed a single word: closer. I stumbled backward and nearly lost my balance. From that moment on, the sounds stopped responding to random noise and reacted only when I approached. If I entered a room, the movement inside the walls followed behind me. At night, I could trace its path through the house by the soft shifting sound between beams. It never moved quickly, always at a slow, steady pace. One night I woke to the feeling of pressure beneath my mattress. The bed frame creaked softly as if weight had settled underneath it. I froze in place, not daring to move or even shift my breathing. The pressure remained for several seconds before sliding away toward the wall behind the headboard. The next morning, I checked beneath the bed and found nothing unusual. I began sleeping on the couch instead, keeping the hallway light on overnight. The following evening, the tapping came from directly behind the couch where I lay. It was louder than before, and the walls seemed thinner somehow. I pressed my palm against it and felt something press back from the other side. The pressure matched the shape of a hand. I pulled away instantly, but the indentation remained visible for a few seconds before smoothing out. The whispering returned, repeating the same word over and over: closer. I packed a small bag and decided I would leave in the morning. That night, I stayed awake with all the lights on. Around 3 in the morning, every sound in the house stopped at once. No tapping, no shifting, no whispering. The silence felt heavier than the noise ever had. Then I heard a crack. It came from the hallway wall near the front bedroom. I stepped out slowly and saw a thin vertical split forming in the drywall. The crack widened slowly from floor to ceiling. From inside the opening, I saw darkness deeper than the empty space between studs should allow. A hand pushed through the split, pale and covered in dust. It looked human, except the fingers were slightly too long. The hand gripped the edge of the crack and pulled. The drywall tore outward in silence, falling in pieces onto the hallway floor. Behind it was not insulation or wood framing. It was a narrow corridor stretching farther than the house's dimensions should allow. The corridor walls were made of the same drywall texture as my house. From deep inside that corridor, I heard the whisper again. Closer. I backed toward the front door without breaking eye contact with the opening. More hands appeared along the corridor walls, pressing outward as if testing the surface. They did not emerge fully, only reached through the gaps. The hallway light flickered once. I unlocked the front door and stepped outside into the cold night air. When I turned back toward the house, the hallway wall looked completely normal again. There was no crack, no debris, no opening. Through the front window, I saw the hallway light still on. And for a moment, I saw a faint silhouette standing where I had been. It looked like me, only thinner. It stood perfectly still, facing the front door. Then it stepped sideways into the wall and disappeared without disturbing the surface. I left that night and never returned for the rest of my belongings. The landlord later told me I had broken the lease early, and when I asked if anyone had moved in after me, he said the house was still vacant. Sometimes when I lie in bed in my new apartment, I hear faint tapping inside the wall beside me. It always comes in the same pattern. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. And no matter how far I move, it always seems to find the wall closest to where I'm standing. I no longer knock back, because I'm afraid that if I do, whatever's on the other side will finally learn how thin the walls really are.